right. Good evening, everyone. Very good to see you. Uh, People I know and people I don't know. Very cool. Um, it's a warm night in Minneapolis. Uh, I hope those of you that are warm can stay a little cool, and those that are cold, if you are cold and that's possible, um, hope you find some warmth. It's nice to be comfortable. Um, yeah. Well, tonight, I want to talk probably very incompletely about um, something that I sit with very often. And I've titled the talk Devotion and the Self. So, my topic for the last year or so has been about Hakuin Ikaku, who was a Zen monk in Japan in the 1700s. And he was a Rinzai monk, and we're a Soto lineage. So I'm finding that a lot of things that he does go on about don't apply directly because they have to do with koans, and they have to do how to work with them. But I'm interested in this man because the letters that he wrote to different people are in existence. They're the physical letters that are in existence, and some of these letters talk about some devotional practices like praying and saying the 10-verse Canon Sutra 1,000 times in a day so that it'll bring you health and wellness. And he also purports that it does many other things like frees you from prison and breaks the executioner's axe and delivers you from hell, which is pretty cool if you're there. But in my life, that is just like, what? Zen to me is this intellectual religion, right? It's this thing. No, this was actually a religion, and I'm thinking, what does that have to do with me today? And some inspection of that kind of brought me into this devotional aspect of Zen. And so what I want to do is talk a little bit about the self and giving up the self, and then a little bit about devotion. And then hopefully afterwards we can have a friendly argument or discussion or questions or however that's going to work out. So in Zen, we talk a lot about the self. Dogen says to study the self. Dogen was one of our the Soto Zen kind of creator in Japan. And he says to study the self is to forget the self. So we're studying the self. And what self is this that we're studying? What I'm not going to talk about is this idea of, it's another Buddhist idea of no self. Because it's pretty clear that I'm sitting here and I'm in a room and I'm talking to you where you're at from this self. So practically and experientially, I have this self. So when I'm talking about letting go of the self, I want to make sure that I'm clear that I'm not talking about destroying this self, that we're not supposed to have this body or this thing that's arising right now. So I'm not talking about the destruction of the self. I'm not talking about losing ourselves in practice or in some kind of effort to negate what actually is here in the room. So I'm talking about a small self, the self that pays bills, that doesn't like asparagus, that likes to go on vacation, that doesn't like when injustice occurs, it falls down the stairs. I mean, we have this physical thing. So the self, when we end up letting go, the self still remains. There's something still here. When we burn up the log of firewood, ash remains. There's still a physicality that continues on in this life. And we also say giving up the self. We kind of equate letting go of the self and giving up the self. And this doesn't necessarily mean giving up those kinds of things that we like ice cream or music. What we're getting at of this letting go and this giving up is a relaxation of a perspective that I am, or that we are, in the middle, in the center of the universe as it's working. It's giving up that we're not the most important thing that is happening in this moment right now. And that isn't to say that we are not significant. To ourselves, to our biological bodies, we're very significant to the people that we love and to our animals and many things. We are not insignificant. And collectively, we're definitely not insignificant. But it's to say that our world, the whole world, the universe, is more than just our life, than our little corner of it. The world is made up of a life that functions in all things. The many lives, everything, all the selves of everything kind of come together and make up this reality that we live in. So as an example, I want to say, okay, how do I perceive myself? I look around the room and I have a conditioned perspective that this room is around me, that I'm in it, I'm in the middle. I see all these things. I've got a table over here and I've got a lot of stuff over here that you can't see, thank goodness. And all these things are mine. And they're for my enjoyment or my use. I can manipulate them if I want. They're to serve my needs. And I'm the most valuable, most important thing in the room. I'm alive here, right? And this is very naturally occurring. We come by this honestly. There's a saying, I come by this honestly. I have grown in my life to exist because my biology tells me to take care of this thing, and experience and my senses have told me over and over again that this thing is important and I need to take care of it. And I can manipulate things and I can get things, and when I don't, I'm sad, and when I do, I'm happy. But letting go of this self that I'm talking about begs the question, what is really happening? So looking around the room as to what is really happening, I see that I'm just this small thing in a large space. I'm surrounded by walls and objects, most of which are far older than I am. And each of these things has its own kind of existence. They each have their own history, how they came into what I think is my possession. They'll probably have a history after I'm done. They seem to continue even though when I'm not in the room. When I come back in the room, things are still here. They're still existing. And so there's so much more that's happening than just me, than just this thing, just this self. All things are happening, and as myself, I'm only the center of the one thing that's happening in this room, and that's me. That's this body, my own mind. And in the vastness of all time and space, how is it that I could still think that I am the center of everything? I don't know, but it happens. I'm still getting used to that. So even in this little room, I can't possibly be the center. And Zen practice, this giving up of the self, this loosening of the perspective that I'm in the middle, allows us some space for compassion. It allows us some space for other people's experience, for the experience of other things. And it allows us to see our place in things more clearly. But letting go of this self, giving up the self, it's uncomfortable. It's scary. Like I said, I'm conditioned to take care of this thing. And if I'm not in the center, and if I'm not always the focus, and if I'm not always taking care of this, what will happen? My world will crumble, fall apart, and I could die. And my body is scared of that. My mind is scared of that. It's terrifying. And that's what brings me to devotion. Zen practice in general, sitting on the cushion in Zazen, seeing our things come up over and over again, seeing them come up and letting them go, shows us that there's not just this happening, that our perceptions are not everything that's going on. And in Zen, we have some practices that help us to kind of shed the self, that help us let go, that help us ease that grip that we have on our perspective a little bit. So I was thinking about devotional practices in Zen. And historically, we have bodhisattvas that we can pray to. We can give offerings of food and water, incense. At Zen Center, we do bowing and we do chanting. We do Zazen. That can be seen as a form of devotion. Work practice. There's probably a lot more that I'm leaving out. And so I'm gonna focus just a second on bowing. And when I'm not gonna qualify that. So when we bow to the Buddha. That could be debated as well. But when we bow to the Buddha, we bow with our whole being, our whole self. We bow with the back of our head. We bow with our toenails. We bow with our elbow tips, the inside of our mouth, everything that we have. Wholehearted bow. All the pain, all our thoughts, all the drama that's going on inside, the whole world, our whole internal vast world is bowing. With all of it, we put our head to the floor, we raise our palms, and we give ourselves away over and over again. Our whole self is coming to this moment, and we give it away in this act of bowing. And by doing this over and over again, we learn that nothing's going to happen. We're safe. I can put myself a little bit off to the side. And when I stand up and I'm done with the bow and I return to the world, I'm still here. I've given myself up entirely and I still stand. And this isn't something that we just know. This is something that we learn in our bodies. And I'm going to talk about that a little more in a minute. So when there's bowing, there's just bowing, just over and over. There's no floor, there's no self, there's no Buddha. We're just bowing. That's it. And I want to examine that a little bit and kind of tease out what's happening. Because all of your body, all of your karma, everything that makes you you is bowing. It's doing something. It's happening. It's real. It's your whole life. Your whole life up to this point, your whole life after this point comes from this bow. You're bowing in a way that only you can. You're still real and you're still there and you're still giving yourself up over and over again. You're bowing with your whole life, and this life that isn't any different than the life of a teacup or a flower or trees or birds. This is the same life that comes up through everything. It's the life of activity. And it happens with our karma, it happens like this. So yes, we talk about egolessness and non-duality and interdependence. And it seems to me that we can kind of go on about this for probably several talks, and I won't do that tonight. We also study sutras. We listen to talks. We get inspiration to follow the way. We get encouragement for practice. And these are things that we get some motivation, and these things are kind of cognitive, and they're kind of in our minds, and we kind of make decisions to do these things. But body practice is really, it's really important for knowing without thinking. So in these practices, so I talked about bowing. We could say the same thing with chanting. We could say the same thing with sewing. These things aren't particularly tied to any one activity. We can have devotion in any aspect of our life. Commonly, devotion can be to a person. It can be to a job or a pet. I can say that I'm pretty devoted to all those things. But Zen practice of devotion, setting aside the self over and over again, is a tool to use to loosen our grasp on what we think is real, what we think we need to survive. It teaches us that we don't have to be at the center of everything. And when we're not at the center of everything and we let go, this is liberation. We can be free from the things that cause us suffering. think that's all I have to say about that topic at the moment. Thank you for your kind attention. If you'd like to unmute yourself